This is Learning Coherence, Chapter 1, a series on the architecture underneath professional learning plans. This chapter, what happens when a planning team starts from a structurally complete draft instead of a blank page. So, Chapter 1, what a marble artifact looks like. Here's how planning usually works. A team sits down. There's a template, maybe a shared doc with some headings, goals, theory of change, logic model, evidence plan. The headings are there, but the page is empty. Everything has to be generated from scratch, together, in real time. And that can be valuable work. Building shared understanding matters. But here's what I kept noticing across schools and across years. The team spends 2 days in a room. The energy is good. The conversation is rich. By the end, there's a document. But the structural connections between the components, the reason this metric measures this goal through this theory of action, those connections were made verbally. They live in the shared memory of whoever happened to be there that day. The document captures conclusions. It rarely captures reasoning. I started thinking about this using a metaphor that's been useful. Clay and marble. A blank template is clay. It's open. It invites generation. But it also means the team has to build and evaluate simultaneously. And that's cognitively expensive. There's social pressure to converge. People are tired by hour 6. By the time someone realizes the theory of action doesn't actually connect back to the goal, the group has moved on and nobody wants to reopen it. So the thinking gets collapsed into prose that sounds coherent but hasn't been tested. A marble artifact is different. It has visible structure, integrated thinking, a framework grounded in research. And here's the critical point. Marble doesn't mean finished. It means structured enough to critique, structured enough to push back on, structured enough that the team can skip the exhausting generation work and go straight to the questions that actually matter. When you enter your school context into learning coherence, strategic priorities, existing initiatives, what you know about your teachers and your constraints, the system generates a structurally connected plan. Goals with their type of change specified through Kilian's CASAB dimensions. Theories of action with explicit causal mechanisms grounded in Weiss's theory of change methodology. A logic model with inputs, activities, outputs and outcomes distinguished. Impact metrics mapped across Guskey's 5 levels, from participant reactions through to student outcomes. Implementation indicators drawn from CBAM's innovation configuration maps. Competency targets aligned to the goals. Every component evaluated against Learning Forward's 11 standards. And here's what makes it different from a clever template. Methodology provenance is tracked. You can look at any construct in the plan and see which framework informed it and why. It's not a black box. The epistemic authority is visible. That's not the system doing your thinking. That's the system bringing 14 frameworks worth of research to the table, so your team can start from interrogation rather than generation. And that changes the conversation in the room. Instead of, what should we write in this section? The question becomes, does this theory of action hold in our context? Is this causal mechanism actually true for our teachers? Is this impact metric measuring what we think it's measuring? Are we being honest about what kind of change we're actually after? Those are better questions. And they're questions a team can only ask when there's something substantive on the table to push against. When the artifact is clay, people are too busy building to interrogate. When the artifact is marble, the interrogation is the work. Think of it this way. In any planning team, there's a role that needs to be filled, the integrator. The person who's read the research across multiple traditions, who holds the structural logic, who can check whether the pieces actually connect. Who knows that a theory of action needs more than an F then? It needs a because. Who knows that a KPI at Guskey Level 1 doesn't tell you anything about practice change? Who knows that Patton would ask whether you're gathering this evidence with the intent and capacity to actually use it for a decision, or just collecting it because the template has a box? That role is essential. It's also work that takes 40 to 60 hours that most schools don't have. So it either gets skipped entirely, or it gets done by one person whose thinking never gets properly challenged, because everyone else is still catching up to the artifact. When the system holds that integrator role, something shifts. The humans in the room get to do what they're actually best at. Bring context, exercise judgment, interrogate assumptions, make the calls that only people who walk those hallways can make. The AI generates the plan. The AI holds the research base across all 14 frameworks. But the AI doesn't know your school. It doesn't know that the coaching team is stretched thin this semester. It doesn't know that the math department just went through a curriculum overhaul and can't absorb another initiative right now. It doesn't know that trust between administration and the faculty is fragile, and that how you roll this out matters as much as what you roll out. That's context, and context is what humans bring, every time. The system gives you a marble artifact, grounded in evidence and methodology. You give it the judgment that makes it real. AI doesn't decide what matters. You do. AI accelerates the structural design, so you spend your time on the thinking that only you can do. And that brings us to where the plan actually starts, not with goals, but with impact.